It's the blood! It's the blood!
This is the Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 50, Funeral Mist. This episode brought to you by the Ajna Offensive. Visit theajnaoffensive.com where you can purchase all the music you're about to hear in this podcast. Welcome to the Requiem Metal Podcast. You just heard
Sword of Faith
by Funeral Mist from the fantastic Maranatha record. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I did a little resurrection.
I think you are.
And Happy Easter.
Yeah, Merry Easter. We're reining in the wonderful resurrection of Christ.
Yep.
And Ascension to Heaven.
Ascension to Heaven.
With one of the most blasphemous bands we could ever imagine. And it's kind of weird because we actually didn't plan it that way. We just sort of decided that Funeral Mist was going to be the first of the podcasts that we recorded today. And
it's going to happen to go up on
Easter.
Easter evening.
Happy accident.
Yeah.
So, and we're actually recording it on Good Friday, the day of crucifixion. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Funeral Mist would think it was a Good Friday.
I guess so. But yeah, anyways, it's been a few weeks since you and I have gotten together, and we've gotten some pretty good feedback from some of the podcasts, some of the new types of ways that we've been kind of going with.
We've got some Twitter things back about people really liking the Naglfar record Diabolical, which, that's cool if, that's your first go. But
sure. And it's one that you and I, well, especially myself, I didn't pick that one up till
I didn't pick it up till, I don't know, 5-6 years ago or something. Yeah. And it was just kind of very dissection-esque.
Mm-hmm. And we got feedback from a couple of people, too, a couple of fans saying that the Skydancer podcast in particular is one of their favorites, and there was a guy who thanked us for forcing him to buy the record.
Who's getting a little bit pissed off because we keep making him spend all his money on metal. But hey, what else is there to spend money on, really? In this troubled times,
exactly,
metal always delivers.
Yep. And anyway, so we appreciate the feedback. So please do give us feedback, because we do read it, and we do kind of take it into consideration when we're kind of formulating all this stuff. So, but the band tonight is returning to our favorite country, right?
Sweden. I mean, we can't really get enough of this place, eh?
Yeah.
So yeah, Funeral Mist started out in the early 90s. It's kind of like an Opeth scenario where the main guy that's in the band now, Arioch, also known as Mortuus from Marduk.
The last two records, right?
Or his civilian name is Daniel Roston. Very kind of, that's what he...
But we won't refer to him by his
no, Arioch is what we'll call him
exactly.
on this show for all intents and purposes. But he kind of came...
Sort of like Ekarath will only refer to Thomas from At the Gates as Necrolord.
Oh, as Necrolord. That makes sense.
That's forever his name is Necrolord to Daniel Ekarath in the Swedish death metal book. So,
but yeah, Arioch came into Funeral Mist early on in the demo kind of age, and ended up starting out as a bass player, and ended up kind of taking over the entire band and kind of molding it in his image.
Well, we were kind of comparing it in a way to what sort of happened with Michael from Opeth, in that Michael wasn't even an original member of Opeth, but yet he's sort of running the deal. He's running the show. Or like Shane Embury, maybe from Napalm Death, was an original member of Napalm.
Yeah,
but he's sort of like he's like the most consistent member, of all time, kind of there. So. And he's guitar player and vocalist and bassist, right?
He does all the loops
the
and
samples and things like that,
synths and stuff like that. And
obviously, you just heard the blood, and it's kind of the backdrop of the band is this sort of use of church choral.
Yeah, and he's
Bible
got like televangelist stuff on like a song we'll hear later on, "Blessed Curse." That's just like, it's a really good. I mean, I haven't heard this kind of like integration of sampling and stuff like since like old Ministry stuff, where it's actually done well and to effect to make it even like more eerie and like I guess more compelling than just having some Exorcist sample or something that anybody could,
or Hellraiser,
anybody could pull out like that. But this actually seems so much more apt to have some televangelist then with this incredibly brutal, searing music behind the thing.
And like Sword of Faith is the album opener, and it's kind of like an appropriate way to sort of introduce the band. And it's interesting too, because like these guys, so much of black metal has taken on kind of a joke status through the years, or like a lot of the black metal guys have just sort of decided to not take themselves seriously anymore, like Dark Throne or Satyricon, but yet they're still putting out good music. But there's like every so often these few like these gems that emerge, like a Deathspell Omega or a Watain or something. Nocmistium. Yeah. Even Nocmistium, I get like.
They've got definitely a little more tongue in cheek, but there's something that's appealing about, like, especially Deathspell Omega and Funeral Mist. They have such a mystique around them to begin with. It makes the music that much more, kind of viable to me. It was like hearing Blaze in the Northern Sky for the first time, like, man, this is some scary stuff. I don't know if these guys are,
whatever, or like in a Satana from Emperor for the first time, like, whoa, something, the choral surrounding it and the aura that it was sort of giving off was so.
Yeah, it's I don't think I've heard anything since those original records outside of like the, not the first couple Deathspell Omegas, but the one, I forget which one came out in like 03. Like the first one that kind of like really blew the doors off for me. And with Funeral Mist, I've only been listening to these guys for like a month.
Yeah.
Never heard of him before this. I'm probably more familiar with his work in Marduk than anything, which this was kind of, I guess apparently in my research I've looked around and people have talked about in 2003 when Salvation came out, their first full-length record. Everybody's like, this is the second coming, this is huge deal, this guy's an absolute genius.
Yeah.
that whole thing, which is usually kind of destined to failure. And then, so I never heard the record, but I heard a distinct difference in Marduk. What is it, Rom 512 or
512, and then Plague
Angel.
Plague Angel, yeah.
And that's where, once Legion, the previous vocalist, left from Marduk, I can really, especially on the newest Marduk record, he's definitely got like interjected and given a whole new life to Marduk, a band that had been kind of like squandering for a while.
Really kind of boring and just sort of repetitive. In
just like
way.
super speed, and now they brought in another bass player as well, and that's been my first kind of exposure to Arioch or Mortuus, as he's known in Marduk. But
is just he adds like a certain layer of, I think, atmosphere, and I think obviously he honed his chops in a band like Funeral Mist, and we're gonna go back to the early stuff in a moment and listen to kind of the progression that the band kind of took from their origins and stuff. But
he's no like virtuoso guitar player by any means, but he has a really really like unbelievable way to create atmosphere and tension, and just close your eyes and listen to this thing, and you just see brutality anytime one of these songs is on.
It's very unsettling. I mean, it's kind of like those sort of mid-period Gehenna releases, like Murder and
Through the Veils of Darkness, and
the one where the guy's on the cover with the dead body and he's holding the gun.
Marion Black.
Yeah, Marion Black with Devil's Work. Like I think of Devil's Work when I think of like super unsettling, like black metal that works. So much of black metal, like we said before, has sort of come across as very like theatrical. This to me seems like an honest attempt to sort of create art. He's trying to like soundscape different things
to make the most like barbaric like Faust record you could possibly make or something.
Exactly.
It's definitely has more of a the term avant-garde black metal is thrown out a lot, but there's only, I think, a handful of bands that actually really encapsulate that. Because the avant-garde to me always means something that's a little bit outside. Like I wouldn't really throw Knock Mystium into that. When there's a sense of humor
sort of
to
like
it,
just psychedelic black metal or something.
Yeah, it doesn't really hold the same kind of impact for me. But like the Decibel Omega stuff and these guys for sure is just it totally transports you back, like black metal did for me in like 90s.
And you go back to like albums like those first couple Arcturus records, which were pretty unsettling in a weird way. There's that one song on Aspira where like it's all vocals recorded backwards and stuff. Yeah, remember it? You could hear like the record sort of.
You're like wasn't like Vebio and Zenda and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the stuff that was absolutely bizarre.
Even like
Datum's Guard.
First Ulver was like really strange. You had the guy running through the woods and then like the cannon firing in the middle of the song. I mean, it was just like it was music that's to sort of unsettle you out of your. Well,
this is almost what not Arcturus, but what Ulver's done when they've gone this more not techno but more electronic route is like really like. Okay, black metal doesn't have to be this, but it has to evoke this kind of feeling. That's got to
be unsettling and things like that. And so I think that was sort of the breath of fresh air that we got, like listening to this stuff. And I know you yourself have you got a hold of this because Albert from Decibel sent it to you because you had to do the illustration for the issue.
He pointed me in the direction of where I could find it.
Oh, okay.
We'll put it that way.
There you go. Okay. Because you had to do the art for the lead review, right?
Yeah.
In the new Decibel.
Yeah, that was the first time I ever heard it, and that was kind of nice. It's not often once you've been listening to stuff forever, and I don't really follow a whole lot of like web forums or anything too often because I just don't have the time to do that. But it was really nice to get something that I had no preconceived notion of it all, threw it on, not expecting anything, and really, really enjoying it.
Yeah. And you told me right away, and I think I grabbed Salvation, which is the second full length by them, which we'll be listening to here in a moment. But
actually, the first full length
was it? Because Devilry's EP.
Yeah,
that's right. But I think I grabbed that and listened to it, and I was like, oh, I kind of had like a Decibel Omega vibe and that sort of thing, but I couldn't get a hold of Maranatha for until like really like a week ago. I finally like sat down with this record, so I'm relatively new to it. So Mark's kind of like you said, he's been into it for a month, but that's really about 3 weeks longer than I have been into it. But the first thing that struck me right away was that sort of that Decibel Omega feel for sure. And they're a band that's probably due for a podcast down the road. But
it'll be a while down the road because this is quite a bit of pummeling for some.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's the one thing we want to say is this might not be your cup of tea right off the bat, but for those of you that have maybe found like a record or have been able to say appreciate like something like Transylvanian Hunger or something or like some of the early Ulvers, which were pretty noisy and chaotic at times, and see that there's kind of like ingenious like like you said, avant-garde artistry to all of it, and that it's not just chaotic for the sake of like annoying the listener, that there's actually like some statements being made and some different, artistic.
There's a lot of harmony and a lot of melody, but it's all veiled under this layer of noise.
Yeah. It's almost like if you can cut through some of the chaos to get to the heart of what the music's sort of doing, then like you're
it's almost like watching old television on static, just to see when you can see certain key things pop through, but after a while it becomes something you see automatically or hear automatically.
Yeah. So hopefully you won't get engulfed in it too much to the point where like you have to turn it off. We've actually we've limited it down to like lesser songs than what we normally do, in hopes of like just sort of wetting the palate a little bit, rather than like just bludgeoning over the head.
Well, yeah, and I definitely, if this is like sparking your interest at all, I'd definitely recommend going out, either get the CD or the LP, because the 128 kilobit stream that we have for the podcast does not do a lot of stuff justice. It's not really super well produced with a really even EQ. This stuff is incredibly high gain, but it does, it's still the I forget who the producer was on this, but it's produced not in the way that like Transylvanian Hunger or some of those really grim records are produced.
There's a warmth. There's
a warmth. There's an organic feel out of anything. There's a really organic feel to all this stuff. It doesn't come across as like if Dim Borger does a sample or keyboard lines, it seems very like symphonic, over the top, kind of bombastic. Yeah,
or like just very like digital. Like you can tell it's like click tracked, and like
this thing could have been totally recorded in the 1970s.
and to me, like it does have this weird loose krautrock almost feel to it.
It's got that kind of, I think, mindset to how it's arranged. It's
or even like the John Cage or just something where you could tell this is someone who like set out with a purpose or a plan in terms of like making confrontational art that's going to, it's like I almost see this like as more like cinematic music in a way. It's like
it's really evocative of imagery. As soon as you hear it, it automatically, without even looking at like the LP booklet has some pretty over the top, imagery and stuff, which adds to the experience. But it's so rich in itself without just hearing the MP3 files. It totally paints a picture of this world for you.
And it reminds me of like the kind of feeling you would get if you watched like a Godard film, or like Pasolini, or some of these like avant-garde 60s like film directors who made like movies that were very unsettling, like where you didn't come away very comfortable, but you had sort of like a lasting image of it or something. And
I don't want to throw around the genius tag. I just think he's
I think he's doing some interesting
things. He's doing really
interesting
stuff for extreme metal, and the genius tag is that's something that's thrown around, so it doesn't mean anything anymore.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, the guy took 6 years to make it this second record.
He was doing Marduk records in between.
So we'll cut a.
But I think the people that automatically pan him as because he got a lot of I guess critical acclaim in 2003. They're kind of missing the point of the thing. Just like it's not about popularity or necessarily the imagery or this guy's personal persona, but just their personal persona. That's kind of redundant. his public persona. I think it just like if the music affects you, then what's wrong with just having that be it? Yeah. Don't get caught up in the politics of the whole thing.
So we're gonna go back to the early days. From you're gonna hear a song from Devilry, what year was that put out? Was like
98 or
98,
something,
99. And that was just a 5 or 6 song EP, correct?
Yeah, and the new ones, or the reissue of it, has some demo tracks and stuff on it as well.
Okay, and this is a tune aptly titled "Funeral Mist."
Yeah, which is always my favorite when you can do Iron Maiden.
Exactly, man. It's the show closer, and it's sort of it'll sound, I don't want to say stock or pedestrian, but I mean it definitely fits in the late 90s sort of black metal kind of aesthetic that was going on.
Yeah, it's going back to a little bit more of the grim stuff, but it's not as diverse as stuff that was happening in, say, Sword of Faith or other stuff that's on Maranatha.
Yeah, but the other thing that you'll hear predominantly in it is it's definitely got like kind of the backdrop of kind of a classic Swedish, Black Death kind of riff, like you would have heard like on an unanimated Dissection Dawn or Nagelfar record or something like that. And obviously, Marduk at times would have that, but Marduk was usually going so fast that they never had room for that sort of Swedish melody to grow into some of their songs as much as I would have liked to have heard.
Their later records kind of just suffered from almost the Dark Funeral syndrome. It was just
too fast.
So fast. It's like there's nothing else to do.
Which I can't remember. Did you mention the Dark Funeral connection? That some
no,
of the
one of the
members,
guitar players, the original. I think it was the original guitar player from might have been
start with a T. Was his name like Typhus or something like that? I don't have his name in front of me, but
I'm not a black metal scholar. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but he
he went on to Dark Funeral after.
Like I think he actually before Devilry came out, he quit.
Yeah.
So, and then it basically became this guy's band along with the drummer.
It was the Arioch show, and Mortuus was the drummer.
Sweet. So we're gonna hear Funeral Mist, which is the title track, and then we're gonna hear a pairing of songs from their first full length, which is Salvation, Perdition's Light, and Son of Hope, and in particular, I think. There's 5 years in between Devilry and Salvation, so obviously
it's pretty obvious when you hear the difference.
Yeah, you'll hear a lot more use of samples and a lot more just the music's more integrated and more complex.
In variation of vocals. I mean that's one thing this guy used. That was like I remember reading an interview with Marduk where they're like talking about his like what he's bringing to the band is like he's bringing his vocals not as just a vocal element, but it's an instrument because he goes all over the map with just bizarre sounding, almost like early Immortal stuff mixed with you name
some shrieks and cat.
Yeah, it's like a black metal version of Mike Patton or something.
Yeah, that's a good way of sort of putting it. You'll hear that a lot more in the next set after this when he starts to really diversify some things. So, Funeral Mist, Perdition's Light, and Son of Hope from Funeral Mist. Enjoy. that was Son of Hope, Perdition's Light, and then the name track, Funeral Mist.
Yeah.
And the last couple tunes we heard, they were from Salvation, which we talked a little bit about before we came into break, but the last tune in particular, Son of Hope, that one stands out to me. You can probably talk a little bit more about Perdition's Light, but that Son of Hope tune is just filled with all these like different kind of like, you know, at the end there you hear the sort of whips and like screaming from torture and like all these different things and the choral chants. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you mentioned that you've read up about on this band and on Arioch and also Morgan from Marduk is where they sort of gain a lot of their sources of inspirations for like the lyrics and the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, it was like the what do they call it? As the they're influenced by like the darkness and brutality of like the Old Testament,
which is really cool. You know,
yeah, they're both. Or I think at least Morgan considers himself like a Bible scholar as far as, you know, pulling that kind of stuff out of it. Not that they're. I mean, you know thy enemy kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
But no, I think it's an interesting thing to pull out this more. You know, King James kind of weird, old, archaic, like how brutal the whole Christian religion was at the point, and to some effect could still be, you know, can still be felt.
Sure.
But it's for me, it's more interesting as a listener to hear stuff that's more rooted in some kind of history or reality that's then completely like, you know,
just blasphemous
praise the Lord Satan and stuff that seems kind of ridiculous and hokey, like Venomous.
Yeah, it's very childish.
It's like anti-LaVey kind of stuff. This is like somebody that, okay, they're honestly, if he's not a Satanist, he's at least totally against you know, the Catholic Church or whatever, or the whole you know, kind of establishment. But they're obviously doing their research. It's not just somebody out there putting on face paint and being a fool.
It's not like 18-year-old teenagers who are just like, you know, this would be cool to like be against this. You know, these are, you know, fairly intelligent people, and they kind of know.
Well, and I think it adds a little bit more validity to the you know, the whole genre of black metal when it's not as it's not like a carnival sideshow act or anything. It's okay. If these people have their opinions about it, fine. They're completely well read on it, and they're creating their own aesthetic out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you heard a really nice contrast musically, I think, too, between Perdition's Light and Son of Hope. Perdition's Light, to me, like had more of that almost like apocalyptic, chaotic, razor sharp kind of black metal thing that you hear like in the middle era, maybe of like Satyricon.
It's got almost like a Shadow Throne kind of feel, but it's more layered.
Yeah,
more layered than like Satyricon's always been kind of based around like simple, effective melodic riffs.
Yeah, this is like
this is like 3 or 4 different levels coming in, and there's always the overarching noise beyond it. There's even like in the White Stone track that we'll hear in a little bit off the new record. They actually leave in like amp hiss.
Oh yeah,
stuff that totally kind of
during that part where it kind of levels out and gets real quiet.
Yeah, you can hear the amp hiss and stuff. Those kind of like things where they're managing to like record this thing like not maybe technically perfect, but like from an audio standpoint, it's just like so interesting. The textures and stuff.
It gives it that 70s vinyl analog kind of feel where you can hear like the wisps of the record, you know, player and different things like that.
Oh yeah,
you know? Kind of the approach again, going back to. It's kind of odd to make 2 Opeth references on a Funeral Mist show, but kind of the same approach Michael takes to like how he records like the acoustic guitars and
leaving string noise in,
finger slides and string noises.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's totally admirable. I think with technology today, you've got to go back to what worked to begin with, and when everything is so spit and polish, and it's like a what's that completely bombastic over the top Dragon Force.
Oh yeah.
When it's like that, or like a Blind Guardian record, as much as I enjoy a Blind Guardian record, sometimes I just like to hear something that sounds real.
Well, it's in a way, it's like you know, if we're talking about kind of, you know, history and European history kind of stuff here, you know, you got and I'm about to go all history teacher on your asses out there.
It's all right,
but
everybody needs to learn a little bit.
During the like mid to late 1700s, throughout like especially France and England and stuff, there was this whole like movement towards like rationality and science and all this stuff. It was called the Enlightenment period, and you know, John Locke, Rousseau, Voltaire, all these sort of guys. And out of that, this sort of like idea of like perfection and like, you know, prove everything, grew like the anti-enlightenment movement, which was romanticism, which is a return back to simplicity and nature, and like kind of like almost a rejection of technology, a rejection of the Industrial Revolution, and like go back to like the roots of nature. And in a way, like as technology I don't know, it's like technology does, like, digitizes music more and more.
Well, it's coming to every,
empty,
it's becoming in every aspect of recording anymore. There's some digital component to it. There's very few people that can completely go analog anymore. I mean, it's like a fact of, you know, the industry now. It's made things easier, but it's also kind of taken a little bit of life out of things.
It's sort of soulless in a way.
So it's all, I think this is like with any art form, with, you know, with the comics work I do a lot of stuff using the computer, but I always try to go back to the original point of, okay, how was this originally done, so I understand the aesthetic, and it's not purely just, okay, I'm going to use this filter in Photoshop to make this look like this. I want to know how this actually works so I can try to replicate that as much as possible.
Well, that and it's the imperfections that sort of give personality to everything. You know, yeah, I mean, you're even seeing it in like film. You know, like you had like sort of this like peak of like Hollywood like digital like special effects kind of thing that came in like the late 90s, early 2000s. I think with the George Lucasification of sort of every, you know, Phantom Menace is like the prime example of like a cold, empty film. You know, it looks great, completely. But it lacks sort of a soul. It
has no heart at all. Yeah.
And then you kind of see this sort of counter reaction that's been going on with like, you know, 28 Days Later and movies where they're like picking up a digital camera and like just even running through the woods, and like it creates like
like a movie I saw last night, Quarantine, is completely shot from the point of view of a reporter following, or a cameraman following a reporter. So there's all this kind of, you know, BS moments of them just, you know, shooting the crap and talking, and but you never ever see it from another perspective. It's always, it's, you know, like the Blair Witch style, but it's not, doesn't make you throw up when you watch it because of the you know, the disorientation of the whole thing,
the shake cam.
But yeah, like using digital stuff to that effect, I think is fantastic when you can actually just break it down to the simplest thing that makes it more of a portable like medium. You don't have to have a whole crew following these people around kind of thing.
And I mean, I don't know, I doubt that this was recorded like analog specifically, but it sounds like it may have been recorded at least live in studio, you know, where you know, some or at least, of that feeling is there, you know.
Yeah, because there's not like an antiseptic quality to this at all, like with some more symphonic black metal acts that seem
Dimmu Borgir, Cradle of Filth, you know, these bands that sort of have,
it's especially with Cradle, it's almost become, you go into in the studio, it's a formula 1 2 3, you scream, you put in some romantic passage, and there you go. This seems much more auteur theory kind of thing, where he's in the studio or he's just doing it in his own house for weeks at a time, layering stuff. I mean, it's like a, you know, a Kevin Shields kind of approach to recording or something.
And it's sort of the same thing that like early Emperor kind of did so well, I thought. You know, for you know, I mean, whereas Darkthrone was like stripped down and simple, like Emperor, you know, like Isan would always talk about wanting to record music as like symphonies, where instead of the instruments all like being located in different spots, it's taking one layer of music and putting like 8 different layers on top of
another,
it. And so like buried deep inside, you could sometimes like hear guitar solos that you didn't hear the first 5 or 6 times you listen to like Anthems at the Welcome at Dusk, you know, like there's some crazy stuff going on that record, but until I put it on headphones and like, you know, broke into it, it was very tough. And
I think after that record they kind of went a little astray as far as the recording went. They got way too self-indulgent. That's always the issue with bands, is like knowing when to like rein it in a little bit before you.
Well, I think too, part of what, and not to turn into the Emperor thing, but I think part of what happened is like it became the Isan project, you know, and he didn't have Samoth there to sort of balance him out and that sort of stuff and argue and that sort of stuff. But you know, you'll hear it like on a song like you know, like Jesus Saves, which we're about to hear here in a moment, where if I'm not mistaken, isn't this a song where there's like a guitar part that's like really technical, but it's like buried super deep in the mix?
You can barely even hear it.
Yeah, it's just like if you really tune in, it's like at the 2 minute or 3 minute mark, like it's there, you know, like going strong. I think it's in this song. I can't remember.
It's like, I think it's just, it's like a straight up like just almost rock style solo, but it's buried so low in the mix, it just kind of, it adds a little bit of texture to what's there
underneath a little bit. Yeah. So, but anyways, the song we heard too, you know, Son of Hope, this last tune, so we can kind of get back to the newer record, kind of had this sort of mid-paced Bathory groove kind of going for it. So you had like the utter like razor sharp speed of Perdition's Light, but they can also kind of do the sort of mid-paced kind of like traditional black metal groove. But then instead of going the traditional route, then they layer it with all these sort of like whips and torture, so it's nothing ordinary, that's for sure. So now we're going to turn back to the newer record, the Maranatha. Yeah, gosh, say that 5 times fast.
I had to look it up on online to find out exactly how to pronounce it, because it's a Aramaic word for one, and dialect. The dialect's probably changed. I'm probably making the horrible Midwesterner incarnation of this, but hey,
it's good we're talking about Aramaic on the day celebrating.
Hey, there
Easter,
you go. It all comes together.
Exactly. And Jesus Saves, which is the next song we're going to hear, but tell us, what's the title mean? Because you were kind of poking around to sort of see what that whole reference was.
Maranatha. I didn't bring this up at the original.
Our Lord has come, right? Is what it means.
Our Lord has come, but it was also used as as almost like a curse. If any man love not the Lord Jesus Christ, let him be anathema, Maranatha, an exceptional curse.
Whoa.
So basically, if you don't follow the Lord, then you be damned, buddy.
Dang. So it's like the podcast we did not too long back with Hooded Menace, the blessed curse. This is sort of the same kind of thing. Maybe Hooded Menace
the exceptional curse.
And Funeral Mist should do a little tour together.
There you go.
And didn't you say like they use some of the same visuals in some of the vinyl too that Hooded Menace do with the Tomb of the Blind Dead and some of the horror movie stuff? Wasn't that these guys you were talking about?
Oh yeah, they've got it's like the Knights Templar movies, the Tombs of the Blind Dead. There's a picture of them marching on.
So Funeral Mist, Hooded Menace, and Cathedral should do like the like the
three
ultimate
phases of doom or something.
Well, the 3 phases of Tomb of the Blind Dead tour or something. But anyways, the record itself has all these different sort of forms of black metal, really. Like there's not any song that's like consistent together in a way.
Well, yes,
if that makes sense. I don't know
Salvation was people are some of the reviews I've read online and stuff. People are kind of like they said they're let down for the newer record, that it's not it's not like cult or true enough.
Yeah,
or whatever.
it's not as in your this has more like an indie quality to it.
Yeah, it really breathes more. It's just as barbaric and over the top as the last records, but it really has a chance to breathe every once in a while, which I think is important for anything this. If you want to have repeat listens, I've listened to the record probably 25 times. And
to me, it's like the difference between this latest Nachmistium and then the one previous, which was sort of more muddy and kind of buried. Was Abstract Nihilism, or I can't remember what the heck that's called.
Yeah, I don't.
It's got the green cover on it. It's
bad head looking.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same kind of thing. Like a lot of people could have been maybe turned off of the commerciality or like the catchiness in a way, or the of this newer Nachmistium, which was allowed to breathe a little bit and bring in some more psychedelic elements and indie elements and things, but still keep a black metal aesthetic the whole time.
I think anybody that wants the same thing over and over again, there's other bands you can go to for that.
Yeah.
And it's just, as an art, if as a musician, I would not want to do the same thing over and over again. I mean, look at bands like Catatonia that consistently reinterpret and reinvent themselves, and then you have bands like My Dying Bride, who end up just kind of it's a slight refinement through the process, which is cool. But with the whole black metal thing, I thought this was done with everybody jumping on the bandwagon with like, oh, you're not true enough, and all this crap. It's like it's music for music's sake, in my opinion. If this was done by some kind of like Christian band, I would still be touting its praises. So.
Exactly, and it's really kind of unfortunate that it's kind of gone that way. But I don't know.
And metal's always had that weird rivalry within itself.
I think so. And now you're talking like these guys are like 3rd, 4th generation black metal almost. The fact their first record didn't come out till '98. So
yeah.
Like, why would anyone put that expectation that you have to be like cult if you're like putting records out in 2009? You know what I mean?
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It was 20 years ago, like when the whole mayhem cult thing sort of started. But anyways, we won't turn this into a soapbox too much. But we're going to hear a trio of tunes coming up, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. But the first one we'll talk about, just because you're about to hear it, is Jesus Saves. And this is a longer tune. It's a little over 8 minutes, although we might kind of fade it down a little bit.
That's the one thing I want to mention real quick is certain songs you can fade out when it starts to go to a different, if it kind of like peters out toward the end. But I've been really hard pressed to actually cut any of the samples out because it really adds to the flavor of the song.
And it's sort of like the same way that like Isis or Mogwai or Neurosis needs it gets repetitive with some of the riffs, but there's a necessary like evil in that. Like they're doing it for a reason. It's not just because they're bored and they don't know what else riffs to play. It's very conceived that way.
Yeah, it's that anticipation of some like that. They give you a tiny little bit of a catchy riff, and then they do this repetitive, and then finally pay off a little bit, or they don't pay off at all. So it's almost this like you're on the edge of your seat all the time.
It's like the George Lynch solo. It's just building up to that every song. You know? Sorry,
there you go.
But exactly, it's that sort of thing. And so what this sort of builds into is like this breakdown about 4 minutes in, where we're kind of picking our brains over and over again as to what this like sort of indie kind of distorted picking.
What it almost reminds me of is like I don't know when the last time you listened to Four Carnations are.
Oh, okay.
But they had this aesthetic.
Which he was from Slint too. It was Dave Pajo.
Yeah, they had this thing Slint, like right? I guess their whole deal was they tried to play. They had their amps and their guitars turned up as loud as possible, but they tried to play as quiet as possible. So I had this. You hear every little weird picking.
It's like it's almost like the distortion pedal is like on overdrive, but yet they're not playing very.
They're
like,
trying
hard.
to play really delicate.
Yeah.
So you get all this weird noise and stuff. It gives me that kind of aesthetic.
And it totally reminds me of, speaking of the new Knock Mystium, it kind of has that sort of feel too.
Yeah, it does.
So, anyways, it's a cool tune. There's a lot of different things going on. It's going to start fast as hell, and then it's going to break down and kind of get into some different areas. So, enjoy Jesus Saves, and then we'll follow that up with Living Temples and White Stone, which we'll talk about when we come back. Welcome back. That was White Stone, Living Temples, and Jesus Saves. Every time I
with
hear
an
that,
exclamation point.
yeah, forgot that.
That differentiates it from the Slayer song.
Exactly. I was going to say, it's so not to confuse it with Slayer's Jesus Saves. So,
yeah, not at all in the same.
Yeah, not at
league,
all. In fact, Jesus Saves in a way, like I think that's the tune that reminds me a little bit of. It's got a Vader feel to it in terms of some of his vocals a little bit.
Oh, like God is dead, hallelujah, kind of.
Yeah, just not even that, but just like the way he sings reminds me a lot of like Peter, kind of. I don't know.
He's all over the map on his vocal approach.
Yeah, his vocals
pretty
are
interesting,
pretty awesome, crazy. But the last couple songs you heard there, like White Stone, that's got this real like indie meets Black Lava
kind of, like black metal anthemic, almost kind of.
Yeah,
and the song we're gonna close out with, Blessed Curse, is like, one of the ultimate. It's like it'd be like the best like slow jogging song ever.
Yeah, we were talking about that because it's the same beat for like 10 11 minutes, more or less, and
it's totally indicative of visuals too. Like with video, as soon as I hear the thing, I could almost see like some like death spiritual healing kind of covered with some televangelist up there, like saying one thing and having like horrible pictures of brutality,
like genocide in the background and stuff like that,
almost like like an old
Crusades.
like grindcore cover or something. That's the kind of images it evokes for me. But I think the song's fantastic.
And not to ignore the middle child in that set, Living Temples. Just the only thing I wanted to say is, hopefully you guys creeped out as I did the first couple times I heard it from the
almost like the Asian sounding female voice in it.
Yeah, it's like
really eerie,
Middle Eastern chanting, or like I don't know if it's Aramaic again, but it clearly doesn't sound like English. No. It reminds me of like when you hear like the demon talking, or like you remember the beginning of The Exorcist when they're in the Middle East.
Yeah,
and there's like this creepiness when he walks into the demon first, like Pazumuma or Pazuzu, yeah. I get that like sort of weird feeling, from it, like just creeped out about it. I don't know.
And the way that they incorporate that sample, or if it's actually somebody recording it, I haven't seen anything saying that it is, but the way that's arranged with the music, it's so like all these all these bizarre tones, and everything just kind of really is so evocative of just creepy ass imagery.
Exactly, just unsettling music,
and which is I haven't really heard an unsettling record since. Like some of the old Gehenna stuff. Yeah, it's been a while, or Deathspell, but
Beyond Dawn used to like kind of be a little bit like weird at times in its own right.
Theirs was more
pre-electric sulking stuff, like
it wasn't quite so sinister, but it was almost this like kind of peyote nightmare kind of thing, more so than like this being like stuck in the catacombs and France being run around by zombie priests or something.
Exactly.
I don't know.
The sort of Hellraiser kind of like you're getting tortured and hung up, and like spikes are going to be nailed in you, kind of
pleasure and pain indivisible.
Yeah, exactly. But you were kind of going back to this last tune, Blessed Curse. It's more or less, I don't want to call it an instrumental because his vocals do sort of dive and weave in at times.
But it's more of a kind of an instrument than really him saying anything.
And it's really driven, like you said, by like just samples after sample. That's sort of the vocal lines in it,
Yeah.
It's a sort of like 10 or 11 minute like progression or like tone poem on like televangelism or like, just preaching in general, Blessed Curse. Here we go again with what the meaning of the title of the record is. And to me, one of the things that I kind of pick up on this song and on others too is this real like primordial guitar tone. And you were joking that I might be thinking that only because of the guy from Primordial sings on the new Marduk, which has
on that one track,
has some similarities to Funeral Mist, in a way. And it might be true. So maybe I'm hearing like that sort of like...
But I don't necessarily hear it in the arrangement, but the guitar tone itself reminds me of Primordial, that buzz.
Yeah, and just even like sort of the like how Primordial's version of black metal was like unlike anyone else's, because it sort of had that Gaelic like paganistic aspect to it that was Irish,
Yeah, it wasn't harsh in the sense of Transylvanian Hunger harsh, but it was harsh with other like sonic elements that weren't necessarily what you thought of when you...
It still was creepy, but yet it was like...
It was creepy on its own terms, kind of thing.
Exactly. So that's one thing to kind of kind of be listening to as this one sort of fades out and closes out. But anyways, hopefully you've enjoyed Funeral Mist. They're definitely a band worth taking an interest in. I think just because they're doing something different, and that's
I think the
what
hype
we're looking for.
Yeah, the hype that they've gotten is well worth it. I don't know about, if you're into music for music's sake, I think definitely check it out. If you're into music because it's a status symbol on how cult your black metal can be, then
I don't know if it's for you.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what your criteria for for music is. So
I could see actually my buddy Trevor used to play in Red Shirt Brigade. Like, I can almost see him having a weird sense of appreciation from this, because he was such a he liked the krautrock stuff so much and noise so much, and he was also a huge Brian Wilson Pet Sounds guy. Yeah, which is all about interweaving soundscapes on top of each other.
The My Bloody Valentine love list before
exactly.
That record,
he loved all that sort of stuff too. So in a way, I could find there could be some indie fascination with this. How some of the pitchfork crowd kind of sometimes picks up on a black metal band every couple of years.
Yeah, I could see them
this,
getting
this could be that band, in a way. But anyways, that's not for me to worry about. But we hope you've enjoyed it. Please do give us some feedback. Let us know what you thought of the show, if it was too chaotic for you, too much, or if you just enough, if you liked it.
It's no two-part Enslaved, but
yeah, exactly.
That gave a couple people a headache. But,
and it probably gave us a headache after a while too. It's a lot of Enslaved.
That is a lot of Enslaved to listen to.
You did say you listened to these records one day, all three back to back to back, and kind of got a little buzzing headache, right?
Yeah, for probably about 5 or 6 hours. And I was staring at the computer, doing some freelance design stuff, and I definitely had a headache. I needed to have a little bit of breathing room every once in a while, but
so the Surgeon General says, limit your Funeral Mist consumption. Be careful, be cautious.
Listen to it on LP and often.
Exactly. But send us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com, or
check out the website.
Drop us a comment.
Leave comments on iTunes or on TalkShoe, and check out requiempodcast.com as the go-to place for all things Requiem metal, which is it's getting there, but it's a slow start getting everything rolling on it. So we're gonna have some more content here pretty soon, but
playlists and things like that.
Yeah, you can definitely you can download. There's pretty good show notes, and definitely when we have a sponsor like we do for this episode, there will be plenty of contacts directly from there where you can get stuff for the bands directly from the labels themselves.
And we've been posting some links to YouTube and stuff like that for videos and different things like that. So anyways, but cool. We hope you enjoy Blessed Curse as we head out. So for Requiem Metal Podcast, I'm Jason.
And have a pleasant Easter, and enjoy Blessed Curse. I'm Mark.
Yes.
So you were
This episode is brought to you by the Ajna Offensive. Visit theajnaoffensive.com where you can purchase all the music that you heard in this podcast.